For continuing reaction then, let's welcome Times correspondent Richard Spencer, who covered the Middle East for many years and can help us unpack what all of this means. Richard, welcome to the programme.
Good morning.
So first of all, your immediate reaction to confirmation from the IDF that they have killed the leader of Hezbollah.
Well, of course, this is only their claim. We haven't heard the confirmation from Hezbollah. But I do think that's probably likely to be true. I don't think the IDF would have said that unless they had good evidence, and we haven't heard any proof of life from Nasrallah or from Hezbollah since this bombing last night, and they were initially poo-pooed that claim, but then they've gone very quiet about it. So it does look like it's true. This is I think a 1967 moment for the Middle East. The Netanyahu has taken the initiative in a way that he's often been reluctant to in the past, to take the really big steps. This is a massive decision on his part to go after the entire Hezbollah leadership, including Nasrallah. It's a huge moral blow to the so-called resistance, and indeed, I think much of the Arab world, for whom Nasrallah was seen as a different leader. In the same way, I mean, to use this comparison, in 1967, to go back to the Six-Day War, this historic moment when Israel defeated the Arab armies all in one go, and led. Their spokesman was President Nasser of Egypt, who's this very bombastic character who seemed to be the strong man that the Arab world wanted to stand up to the West. And again, this is what they thought of. So many in the Arab world thought of Nasrallah, even those who didn't like him or agree with him, thought he was a different kind of Arab leader, someone who could stand up to Israel, stand up to the West. And Netanyahu and Israel have taken him on and apparently killed him. We don't know at all what will happen next. It leaves us in an uncharted territory. But this is an incredible moral blow for the anti-Israel cause.
Yeah. One immediate consideration here, Richard, is that it's been said already on the programme that over the course of the last week, Hezbollah has been basically dismantled. One of the most formidable militias in the region has been degraded and dismantled in the last, number of days. And immediately we sort of consider then why Hamas has not been dismantled quite so quickly. And it speaks to the differences perhaps in the strategies and tactics of the two groups who are both anti-Israel, but who operate differently.
Yeah, I think so. Hamas, Hamas has been fighting Israel on and off for 20 years now, and it calculated how to do it. It calculated very seriously how to defend its leadership, how to change its tactics in the face of Israeli overwhelming strength. Hezbollah appears to have been extraordinarily complacent. One mustn't overlook the civilian losses, the terrible uncertainty that so many people in Lebanon are feeling now. But just looking at it from a military perspective, for Hezbollah to have seen what happened with those pages, seen how at some point their organization must have been infiltrated by Mossad with those astonishing attacks, then to have a meeting of its senior leadership all together in a bunker in Hezbollah's stronghold in Beirut, seen that wiped out, and then continue to hold their meetings in the same place in Dahia in South Beirut, with Nasrallah there and other senior leaders almost certainly, without changing their tactics, without changing is unbelievable. It's quite unbelievable that. Yeah. I'd say that's the blow to the Arab world. Hezbollah was supposed to be different. They were supposed to be smart. They were supposed to have worked out how to take on Israel. So to see that kind of basic error carried out is quite extraordinary.
Yeah, it's fascinating that. I've seen one other comparison already this morning, Richard. Perhaps you can add your take to this. That the sort of response of Hezbollah in the aftermath of the assassination of Qasem Soleimani in 2020, I think this was. Yes, the leader of the Quds Guards, part of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and that happened in Baghdad. And so I don't know if it's a helpful comparison to make, but could we learn or understand anything from the response then to what we might anticipate now?
Yeah, I think in some ways this is even more significant. I mean, Qasem Soleimani was a battlefield leader. I mean, he was a very accomplished military strategist, but he was not a political leader. I mean, his thoughts on politics were no doubt important, but he was a military strategist. Nasrallah was the political strategist. He was, he was in some ways the second most important person to Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader of Iran, in the whole anti-Israel, anti-Western axis in the Middle East. He actually took over from Qasem Soleimani in some ways as the strategist for these Iran-backed militias. He was very close to Khamenei, and Khamenei relied on his advice. Khamenei himself is very elderly now; he's in his mid-80s, and often said to be unwell. We don't, but that's often said of leaders that the West doesn't like. But that who is going to take over strategizing the resistance, again, as they call it, their strategies, their policies, how they engage with the West, how they engage with the Middle East, now is not clear. So much of that top leadership in Hezbollah has been taken out, and we have a new president in Iran who is untested and seems to be of a sort of a more inclined to engage with the West. The politics of all this are very uncertain and very unclear. And of course, for Lebanon itself, there is now this huge vacuum where its most powerful figures once were, and that itself is destabilizing because Lebanon is such a fractured but also key state in the region.
Richard, thank you very much. Thank you for your immediate reaction to the breaking story this morning. That is Times correspondent Richard Spencer reacting to the news that the Israel Defense Forces say they have killed the leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, as a result of those massive strikes in Beirut in the last kind of 24 hours or so. I think one of the kind of themes then that we're hearing from our correspondents and analysts is that this is something of a significant blow to Hezbollah, to its reputation, to its morale, and the degrading of Hezbollah's leadership and functionality, frankly, over the last week leaves many questioning how they will respond, how quickly they can respond, and of course, in a broader sense, what Iran does in all of this. They've been largely standing by this on the sidelines, as Samer Al-Atrash was telling us earlier. So, do they continue to do that, or do they choose this moment to intervene?
We are bringing you the breaking news, which has reached us in the last 15 or 20 minutes, that the IDF is reporting that the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah has been killed in an airstrike in Beirut. We've been bringing you the news all throughout the morning. There has been endless strikes throughout the course of the night in Beirut. We understand that there was what the IDF likes to call a clinical strike on what were 6 buildings, which is understood that Hezbollah headquarters were underneath. There were real mixed reports throughout the course of the morning whether Hassan Nasrallah had been killed, but the IDF is now saying that it has. Some really strong words, as you would expect from the IDF. The Chief of Staff has put out a statement, a video message indeed, in the last few minutes, saying the message is very clear. Whoever threatens Israeli citizens, we know how to get them in the north, the south, or further away. We were speaking to the Times Middle East correspondent probably about 10 minutes ago now, Samer Al-Atrash, about the implications of this. And he said very clearly, we are at a crossroads. The Middle East will look different in the years to come. He said that this has been a strategic win for Israel. He says that it has changed the face of Iranian influence in the region. And that in itself is critical because we know, of course, that Hezbollah is backed, is armed, is supported by Iran. We know from the walkie-talkie attacks, from the pager attacks, from the airstrikes over the last week, not to mention the killing of Hassan Nasrallah overnight, that has severely weakened Hezbollah. Now, we've been told over the last few weeks there are tens of thousands of Hezbollah members in Lebanon. But when senior leadership figures have been taken out, there are going to be implications. Sama al-Trush told us a little bit earlier on that actually Iran has stepped back in the last week or so, hasn't really supported Hezbollah. And so now it has really affected the way they're going to be viewed in the region. So what happens now? Does Hezbollah have the ability to strike back? We know that in the past they have had long-range missiles. Do they still have them? Have they been taken out by Israel? Would they now use them? Would Iran encourage them to use them? Because at the moment, those rockets are only just going into the north of Israel. There's so much that we need to talk about, and we'll get into that over the course of the next few minutes.
And just on the situation regarding Iran, in the last week, of course, there have been developments around all of this. The Iranian Supreme Leader calling an emergency meeting of the Security Council at his home in Tehran. So there's that implication. Our Middle East correspondent, Samer Al-Atras, telling us that Iran has really stood aside, as you were saying, and also that today really brings Iran into disrepute among its supporters, which is notable and significant in terms of the implications of what all of this then does. I think the additional bit of context that is worth just stating is that Hezbollah, headed by Hassan Nasrallah, joined the Hamas terrorist organisation in sort of its pushback against Israel in the aftermath of the October the 7th attacks. And there have been ongoing attacks by Hezbollah against Israel over the course of the best part of a year now. And so the IDF statement today says the IDF will continue operating against anyone who promotes and engages in terrorism against the state of Israel and its people. And so the language coming from the IDF this morning is certainly not relenting in terms of the displays of force that it is determined to keep demonstrating.
Well, let's speak now to Stephanie Glinsky, who is Middle East correspondent in Beirut. Morning to you, Stephanie.
Good morning. Hello.
So the news has obviously reached us in the last 15 or 20 minutes that the Hezbollah leader, Hassan Nasrallah, has been killed in this airstrike. Tell us what the reaction has been in Beirut, and indeed, are the airstrikes continuing?
Yes, absolutely. So I was actually just out. I'm currently in a taxi going from one spot to the next. I was out with people who have been displaced yesterday by the strikes, who are now living on the streets in Beirut. And the reactions I've seen so far were a little bit mixed. So I've seen people who say they don't believe it. They are still waiting for more statements to confirm the news. Other people say they are very, very worried. The situation in the capital has already escalated. Displaced people are all over the city. People are heading north into northern parts of Lebanon, and people say they are very, very worried about a ground invasion. We've also heard the news of this Iranian airline, a civilian aircraft that was supposed to land here at Beirut airport. Of course, airplanes are still landing. With the Ministry of Transport saying the plane needed to turn around because it could be a potential target for Israel. So the situation here is escalating. People are very, very worried. The streets are, like I said, they are full of people who are displaced. I'm just heading to another area where more people are gathering and trying to find shelter. Everything is very much on edge.
There is, of course, this political dimension that we talk about. But as you rightly say, we mustn't forget the people, the civilians who are being impacted in Lebanon. And we've already heard this morning many thousands of people out on the streets. Just give us a sense of the scene there and what people have told you.
The scene is honestly, it's unimaginable. It is horrifying. It is sad. It is so tragic. There are children. They are just sleeping on the concrete, on the pavement. People have brought literally nothing. Some people are getting food donations now and water. It's very, very hard when parents are complaining that their children are burning in the sun. It's absolutely devastating what I've seen, and people are also wondering what they're going to do next. A lot of people who are gathering in squares here in Beirut say they don't know where they're going next. Some squares have been visited by police, and police is also trying to get people away from public areas, telling them that they should find shelter. But people just don't know where to go. Kids are crying. Parents haven't really brought any food for them. It's absolutely, absolutely devastating.
Stephanie, thank you so much for speaking to us. That's Stephanie Glinsky. She's a Middle East correspondent in Beirut, and we can see she's speaking to us live from a taxi. Slightly glitchy line, but I'm sure you'll appreciate she's on the ground in Beirut and she is indeed moving.